Thank you. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Senator Brooks. Here. Senator Hammond. Senator Pickard. Senator Spearman. Chair Harris.
All right, we have 3 members present, which means we have quorum. We've got one bill on our agenda this morning, so I'll welcome our colleague, Assemblyman Watts, to the table. Go ahead and begin when you are ready, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15. I'm glad to present Assembly Bill 383 for your consideration today, and I appreciate you scheduling it and coming in at 8 o'clock on day 119 of the session to hear it, so thank you. Very briefly, giving a high-level overview of the bill, both the legislature and Governor Sisolak have set bold goals to address climate change and reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. And one of the key elements to achieving that is energy efficiency. Several measures in our state climate strategy focus on efficiency, and this bill specifically addresses one of the 17 policies that were evaluated in that strategy by adopting appliance and equipment efficiency standards. The policies provide a range of benefits, saving energy as well as water, particularly important now given the drought situation that we're facing, avoiding pollution that negatively affects both the climate and public health, and it means spending less on utility bills, saving families and businesses money. We've seen a lot of these initiatives come forward and work, and so we're looking to build on that with AB 383 today. Very brief overview of the bill itself in its third reprint. Sections 2 through 30 define the various appliances and other key terms that the bill applies to. Section 31 tasks the Governor's Office of Energy with adopting standards for those outlined appliances, which would then have to be met by anybody offering those items for sale or lease by July 1st, 2023, and for installation in 2024. It sets the minimum levels of those standards and allows them to be modified in the future as technology improves, while also providing a grace period for the industry and for retailers to prepare. Section 32 would allow the Governor's Office of Energy to adopt standards for other items moving forward as technology evolves, and again provides that grace period. All of this rulemaking, I'd like to add, would happen in a public and transparent way through the Nevada Administrative Procedures Act, and one of the latest amendments in consultation with certain stakeholders clarifies that the cost to consumers would be considered during that rulemaking process, and that consumers could, if they saw that there was a significant burden, request a 1-year delay of the implementation of a standard. And then basically the remainder of the bill clarifies how compliance would work, and essentially what it is certification. Many of these standards are Energy Star standards, and essentially setting those as kind of the floor or minimum. And so there are already product databases available that of certified products that GOE can look through to ensure that we've got the right products on the shelves. One thing I'd like to highlight as well is that Section 37 provides the Office of Energy the authority to set standards specifically related to flexible demand technologies, which I think is really interesting as smart home innovations continue to move forward. A little over a decade ago, smart thermostats were fairly rare. Now they're pretty prevalent, and we can see those other technologies coming online for water heaters and other things, electric vehicle charging as well. So as those technologies continue to enter buildings, those provide additional opportunities for us to manage the electric load and promote efficiency. And then Section 38 of the bill provides some exemptions to the application of the standards. That's a high-level overview, and I just want to thank many stakeholders, local governments, business associations who worked with us to get this bill in a good place, addressed some of the concerns, clarified some of the provisions, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions that members of the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. And when we're looking at the standards, and I think the bill is pretty straightforward with the definitions and then getting into the different standards. That would be the minimum standard that the Office of Energy, they would make regulations around. Energy Star, which I think we're all familiar with, is most of it. But then you have some other things like California Code of Regulations, the Canadian Standards Association, some other stuff. Is that because Energy Star just doesn't cover those particular types of products?
Thank you for that question, Senator Brooks. Howard Watts for the record. That is correct. And so one thing I didn't mention in my testimony is that you'll see that the listed appliances are frankly kind of an odd assortment. That's because for most of the ones that we use in the home, the federal government has set standards for efficiency for those appliances. And once the federal government sets those standards, no state can preempt them. And so this is really filling in the gaps where the federal government has not stepped in. Energy Star, of course, is a federal program, but not a requirement. And so we're essentially stepping in to establish that as the baseline for many of these appliances. There are some where California or Canada have actually led the way in setting standards, and we don't have a standard really at the federal level. And so we're basically turning to their research and regulations in order to set the standards for those items.
And then I particularly am glad to see that in Section 37 you've addressed flexible demand technologies. And then earlier in the bill, you also addressed electric vehicle chargers, which can fit into that flexible demand technologies category. I think that's obviously something that's going to be the wave of the future. I have a bunch of them sitting in my house right now, just waiting to go, and waiting for me to get back from Carson City. And then in the same section, 37, sub 2, it looks like you are, is it sub 2? I lost my place here, I'm sorry. But you address the cybersecurity issues associated with flexible demand technologies, but not just that. I mean, everything is in the Internet of Things. Everything in your house is starting to communicate with the world. So I'm glad that you are addressing that issue, because I don't want my refrigerator spying on me.
Thank you for that, Senator Brooks. Howard Watts for the record. Yes, I agree, and that's one of the reasons we put that in there. Again, it's authorizing language, so we're just making sure that we provide the Office of Energy the ability to address these things moving forward as the technology evolves without having to wait for every session of the legislature to come back and make adjustments to this statute. So allowing standards to be set for that flexible demand technology and making sure that we lay out some of the considerations. And cybersecurity certainly came up right away as one of the things that needs to be taken into consideration before moving forward on any such standards. I think I agree that EV supply equipment is definitely one of the areas that we're going to be looking at. And as I had mentioned before, one of the areas that some other states are moving forward and setting standards on are hot water heaters with communication ports. Again, so that you can now adjust heaters that maybe be heating water, at different times, and you can modify that schedule again to manage load. So not applying energy to heat that water during certain times, and then even at night, and then heating it back up to where you need it right before the morning shower, and saving some energy along the way.
Senator Spearman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thanks for the bill. Appreciate it. I'm smiling, but you can't tell. Okay. So just a couple of things. One of the things that happens when we do things here, everybody that's paying attention to here really knows and understands exactly what happened. But anybody that's 3 levels below doesn't know. So is there a plan for outreach? and education. And, the standard is let's go to the communities, and that's good too. But the other outreach that I know we need to do, and that is with our military. I buy all my appliances mostly at the PX. And they have the Energy Star rating, but then they have a lot of others, some of the things that are listed here. Is there any plan to reach out, number one, to someplace like Nellis, or even look at the area commander? That's one question.
Thank you for that question, Senator Spearman. Howard Watts for the record. I do imagine that there would be continuing outreach and education and engagement because, again, after we pass this, it's going to have to go through a regulatory process at the Governor's Office of Energy. I know that even through the process of working on this bill, we've engaged with a lot of different stakeholders in various industries and sectors throughout Nevada who either sell or install or use some of these appliances. So I think we're already off to a start on that, and we can build on that by making sure that we incorporate everyone, including members of the military. So that's what I have to say in terms of outreach. I think, from the legislative process through the regulatory process and implementation, we can make sure that outreach is happening.
And I guess what I'm asking, is there a way to just make sure that that's pointed? Another avenue of outreach that we don't use a lot, this is not criticism, okay? Another avenue that we don't use a lot are Greek organizations. And Greek organizations usually meet once a month or something like that, and they do a whole lot of things in terms of making sure that the members know, and the members make sure that their community or their circles of influence know. So that would be another outlet, certainly, to think about.
Thank you for that, Senator Spearman. Howard Watts for the record. I appreciate those suggestions, and we'll make sure that we include those folks in our outreach. And one other thing that I'd just say is that a lot of these standards, there is some analysis, and I think we'll save it for time, but it is available on Nellis as exhibits that looks at not only the energy, water, carbon savings, utility cost savings over time. There's also a specific table that looks at the payback period on many of these items that we're looking at. And for many of them, it is 0. In other words, setting these standards and taking out the least efficient items, the gains in efficiency actually, the lowest efficiency item and an efficient item are essentially at cost parity. So we're just saving people money by them not using as much energy. Others have payback periods that are within a year or two, and all of the payback periods are less than the useful life of the item. So ultimately, as these efficient items transition onto the shelves for retail over the next few years, we're just looking at saving people money.
And that's why that's why I'm suggesting these outlets. Everything you said, I really understand. If I were to go to 5 people on the street in my district and ask them what does this mean, they may not know. So I'm just all I'm saying is there's some outlets that most of the time we don't do, and some of that may be a consequence of people not realizing that they're there. I'm always going to talk about veterans and military issues because that's me, and I know that a number of things happen with respect to Greek organizations that take a project, and that's because it's what we do. They take a project and they'll make sure that the word gets out. They'll make sure that people know, people understand, and they can break it down to bite-size, to the bite-size process. That's all.
Thank you for that, Howard Watts for the record. I really appreciate that, and I'll be following up with you on some of that. I know that you're well aware of the Military Advisory Board's involvement on some of the broader issues around climate and energy, and I think that would be a really interesting opportunity to also engage with them in terms of helping spread the word and make the connections to those communities.
What's your plan for enforcement, right? How do you envision this working? So the Governor's Office of Energy sets the standards. How do you envision that being enforced, and upon who? The retailer? Where do we where do we, kind of insert ourselves, and what is the stick, I guess?
Thank you for that question, Senator Chair Harris. Howard Watts for the record. This was a subject of much discussion, particularly in the Assembly. There was some concern that this would become a local government enforcement, and that it would also be involved in kind of building code enforcement. We wanted to clarify that was not the case and not the intent. So it will come with GOE. Again, what they're essentially going to do is they're going to have lists of products, and then, they'll have the ability to do some kind of auditing or spot checking. Of course, we're going to go to every single store and check the shelves for every single item. No, but that's essentially the enforcement ability, is to be able to do some investigations. If somebody, a particularly astute customers want to flag an issue, then we can the state can go and follow up, and it really will primarily be at the retail level. One other thing I just want to make sure I get on the record is we are not forcing retrofitting of anything. So this isn't changing anything that anybody already has in. These standards will apply prospectively, and they apply for essentially sale moving forward. And so that's where this is targeted. I know that there's been some questions about what if somebody buys something in another state and brings it back. Again, we can't regulate interstate commerce. So we're just looking to do what we can with the things that are being sold into the state to Nevadans moving forward.
All right, any additional questions? Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pardon the tardiness. If you've already addressed this, I apologize. Just a couple of questions. First, the bill references Energy Star, in fact, relies upon Energy Star, which is a long-standing program. Why isn't Energy Star as in the present form, being voluntary and something that many people pay attention to? Why isn't that good enough? Why do we have to put our thumbs on people to make sure that they follow this?
Thank you for the question, Senator Pickard. Howard Watts for the record. So a couple of quick things. One is, and I think I did speak to this a little bit earlier, many of these standards provide cost savings starting on day one. So the price comparison between the least efficient items and items that are at Energy Star level, in some of the cases of these items, there's no difference. So by making sure that we're taking the least efficient items off the shelves, we're actually saving people money on day one. Another thing that I'd note is that you may see that this is a somewhat eclectic assortment of items, and that's because on a whole other range of items, including washers, dryers, a lot of residential appliances, the federal government has already set standards. Those standards cannot be preempted by states. And so this is really an effort, and this is not only in Nevada. So there are other states that are setting these standards, and we're trying to keep those standards fairly unified so that there's not difference as you go from one state to another. But this is really aimed at filling in the gaps where the federal government has not yet set standards. And I'd just like to make it clear that if they do set standards for any of these items, our state standards become moot at that point.
All right, I appreciate that, and you just answered my next question, so let me go on. Well, let me first follow up on what you just said. You're right in that the federal standards will preempt ours, but I haven't found any other state that has done what this proposes to do. Now, obviously, I only had a few hours to look. I jumped on Westlaw and did a 50-state survey, and what I did find weren't this strict. We talked about the enforceability piece, which I'll get to in a second, but can you tell me what was this modeled off of, and how many other states have gone this far?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Senator Pickard. Howard Watts for the record. So we work with an organization that's also available by Zoom to step in and potentially add some additional context if that's needed. It's called the Appliance Standards Awareness Project. And they work with industry that produces these items to try and figure out what efficiency levels make sense, and they look at those payback periods and evaluate the cost effectiveness and availability of those technologies, and make recommendations and continue to update those as the marketplace evolves. So you'll see things like electric vehicle chargers. I think maybe only 1 or 2 other states have moved forward on those. So every year or so, they look at kind of the marketplace, continue to engage with the industry and similar entities to offices of energy, and make recommendations. So that's why you'll see there are some items in here that are not reflected in other states. However, those are things that I think we'll continue to see proposed, and the standards themselves will be unified. The other thing that I think is important about this proposal is we do give the Governor's Office of Energy the ability to update those while also allowing a grace period for that change to be absorbed into the market. And that, again, is aimed at making sure that we can have some consistency so that as the technology modifies, we don't have to wait for the next legislative session in order to make an adjustment. We have give the office the flexibility to make those adjustments and have some consistency.
All right, and were you going to tell me what states have gone this far?
I'll have Mr. Fady with the ASAP provide some additional context.
Yes, good morning, Chair Harris and members of the committee. Let me know, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're doing just fine, Mr. Fady. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to check. Senator, to your question, at least one other state has adopted the standards in the bill, and particularly in the West, many states have adopted almost all of the standards that are in the bill, specifically Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, and California have adopted for most of the products in the bill. And it's interesting, you see a bit of an overlap there with those states. Those are states that have also set, goals for reducing electricity usage, for cleaning up their electric grid, for trying to reduce air pollution, and to save consumers money along the way, which is what this bill helps accomplish. And so those states have adopted in the West. You've also seen in the East, Vermont and Massachusetts have adopted almost all of these standards. And then there are still states with bills working through their legislature at this time that have, again, most of the products in the bill here. There's been tremendous interest in this policy, quite honestly, in the last few years. And we anticipate that additional states will be looking to adopt in the future. So other states have been first movers on all of these products. Other states are looking to adopt in the future. And so Nevada would not be completely out in front, but would also still be providing leadership to help move other states forward as well.
All right, and thank you.
Just very quickly, sorry, Senator Pickard. Mr. Fady, if you could state your name for the record and the organization you represent.
Yes, my apologies. Brian Fady, last name spelled F-A-D-I-E, and I'm with the Appliance Standards Awareness Project.
And if I may, before Senator follows up, I might have a little bit of additional context to add. One of the things, and I don't know if you were here when we discussed this, Senator, is Section 37 with the flexible demand technology. We're allowing the state to adopt some standards in this area. Just by comparison, the California legislature passed a law committing to establish those standards and then having the state go down that path. So this is not a mandate. It is an option. that we're giving. And then there are a couple of states, I believe Washington and Oregon, have picked out a specific type of technology, communication ports on water heaters, and adopted those standards. We are not explicitly adopting those standards in this bill, instead giving the flexibility for the state to adopt those moving forward. And then I think to try and also just get some further clarity on one of your questions, Mr. Fady, would you mind sharing what are the most recent additions to kind of the standards policies for consideration?
Yeah, thank you. Chair Harris and members of the committee, some of the newer products that have been added include air purifiers and the electric vehicle supply equipment, as well as the gas fireplaces. And Assemblyman Watts described earlier that there is an evaluation process that happens annually to take a look at changes in the appliance marketplace, changes in technology, to evaluate does a product make sense to try to set state level standards for. And we have a set of criteria that we use when making evaluations. You want to make sure that there's going to be good consumer savings, that you have zero or low payback period, that there are plenty of options, models that will be compliant on day one so that consumers have plenty of choice. And also that you have data available to analyze, will there be good electricity savings? Will there be good air pollution savings? And all of the products that are included in this bill have met those criteria, that we've been able to verify that there would be good consumer savings, good energy savings, good air pollution savings, and that there is wide availability of these products in the market that would be compliant on day one.
All right, thank you. And my last question had to do with enforcement. You kind of touched on it already. My experience has been, because I was in development for almost 20 years, we tried to lead in terms of, on our residential side, we were trying to lead in terms of Energy Star and Green Globes on the commercial side. Or lead, I guess we did more lead than Green Globe stuff, but I never encountered a situation where you could buy anything with a higher energy efficiency for the same price as a lower. It never happened. It always cost more. Now, on small consumer items like air purifiers and stuff, I could see maybe being a little more competitive, but these things cost money to make it more efficient, and so the manufacturers typically will charge more, number one, because it costs more, and number two, because it's better. The market will sustain a higher price. So on the enforcement side, the Energy Star program already exists. And you touched on really probably the most difficult part of this, and that's we are a very transient society in Nevada. So you've got people moving in and out all the time. And where you've got civil penalties for failure to meet, and I don't know how you would prove that, or how a consumer would, this isn't giving me that 3 cents per day that I'm supposed to be getting in efficiency. From a practical standpoint, who is it that enforces this? Is it done strictly through litigation because it's a civil penalty? And who is going to be out there testing to verify that these things have met the standards in the person's home or in the business, as opposed to the manufacturer's certifications? Because every unit is a little bit different than the next coming off the line. How do we, from a practical standpoint, how do we do this?
Thank you for that question,
And
Senator.
just before you answer, Senator Pickard, I want to point you to two things. One, Assemblyman Watts mentioned that we have an exhibit online that talks about the expected pay off period.
Yeah,
where you can-
paybacks.
The payback period where you can take a look at the different appliances and how long it would take you, an estimate of how long it would take you to recoup the cost of the appliance. Second, I want to note that this bill does not touch on the consumer protection issues. So I imagine that anyone today who is claiming something is Energy Star rated, and it is not, would be in the same amount of trouble and have to deal with the same folks they have to deal with after this bill passes. It doesn't touch on that particular process.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense because that if someone has mislabeled their product, that's actually that I think that's easier to prove.
Right.
We're talking about those incremental differences in what they have today versus what they have tomorrow. And had I plugged my computer in last night, I probably could look at that exhibit, but I can't right now.
All right. Thank you for that, Senator Pickard. Howard Watts for the record. Glad to address this, and I did touch on it a little bit before. So first, let me just be extremely clear, and I believe we'll have somebody from the Governor's Office of Energy here who could add on to this. The state and the Governor's Office of Energy is the entity tasked with enforcement. I want to be clear about that. It's not going to fall on local government. It's not going to fall on code enforcement. And the point of compliance is with the retailers who are selling products to Nevadans. Again, we cannot regulate interstate commerce. We have some clarifying language at the end of the bill to make sure that if people have product here, but they're moving that product out of the state, the standards don't apply. So it is product that is being sold to Nevadans here. Now, you mentioned people move around and they bring their items with them, and I want to be extremely clear. There is no enforcement that goes into someone's home or someone's place of business. Whatever items you have is fine. This is about when something breaks or you need something new and you go to the store to buy it, making sure that the options that are available are efficient. And so no one's coming in to see, what models of things are in place and making sure that they meet certain standards. It really is, at the end of the day, aimed at new inventory that's being brought into the marketplace. And I hope that addresses your question.
It does, and I appreciate that. Just my last question, Madam Chair, is just as to the efficiency of the units. It sounds like we're talking mostly consumer goods, and yet, as you pointed out, most of the consumer goods right now under the federal paradigm preclude our intrusion. Can you remind me, I think you told me, but can you remind me which of the items in here are not covered by the federal rules and would be unique to Nevada?
Of course, thank you for that question, Senator Pickard. Howard Watts for the record. First thing I want to state is that all of these items do not have federal standards set. And so, as federal standards are set, again, these would become moot, and organizations such as ASAP actually removed them from their policy recommendations because there is no longer a point in a state setting a standard. So all of these would have state standards set. As Mr. Fady indicated, many states have already set standards, these levels of standards for many of the items that are covered under this bill. And I can give you a very brief rundown. It includes, let's see
Well,
here.
if
Well,
all of these-
it includes a range of commercial items. So commercial dishwashers, fryers, ovens, steam cookers, and hot food holding cabinets. Then it covers air purifiers, certain specific types of fluorescent lights that weren't covered by some of the lighting standards we adopted last session, computers and monitors, water coolers, residential ventilating fans, gas fireplaces, and electric vehicle supply equipment.
Okay, we'll wrap up the questions with one more from Senator Spearman.
I may have forgotten. Just kidding. So, Senator Watts, first of all, thanks a lot for bringing the legislation. I think we've had conversations about this several years ago. So thank you for that. I have one question. I know that Air Liquide which is it's based primarily in France, but they have just invested $200 million in a new facility in North Las Vegas. I believe it's in my district. But, so my question would be, we've talked a lot in this bill about in terms of what that means for electricity. But we also know that hydrogen fuel cells are starting to emerge too in terms of other applications for appliances, for heating, cars, et cetera, et cetera. So is there a way in the rulemaking process that we can include the phrase that is so often overlooked, without limitation, so that as these other renewable energy sources come online, we don't have to come back and try to do something again? And I know that Air Liquide is thinking about doing a lot of different things. So $200 million for North Las Vegas, to me, is a big deal.
Thank you very much for that question, Senator Spearman. Howard Watts for the record. Yes, absolutely. And what I would particularly point you to is Section 32 of the bill, which allows the Office of Energy to set standards for other items moving forward. So as that technology matures, for example, we have most of these items in here are powered by electricity. We also have gas fireplaces. And we know that there are some items that are powered by electricity, some are powered by gas. As other energy sources may become available, Section 32 would allow the office, again, in consultation with the public, industry stakeholders, consumer groups, et cetera, to consider modifying the standards for some of these items or creating new standards for items with new energy sources moving forward. And the last thing I would say is this. This does build upon a bill that I actually brought forward and we passed last session, setting some efficiency standards for fixtures, and we tied those to water sense. And again, one of the goals of these policies is for us not to have to only address it in statute every other year when we are in session, and create the flexibility, as you stated, to let the standards adjust as the technology and the market does.
All right, thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. We'll go ahead and move to testimony at this point. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to testify in support?
Good morning, Chair Harris and members of the committee. I'm Angie Dykema here on behalf of SWEEP, the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and thank you for scheduling this to be heard today. We thank the bill sponsor for bringing this forward, and just want to point out that this is an important piece of legislation, and it's one of the most impactful and common sense steps that a state can take to reduce energy waste, safeguard consumers and small businesses, reduce energy bills, and meaningfully act on climate change. In fact, it was one of the recommendations in the Nevada State Climate Strategy. I do think the letters of support that were submitted were uploaded to Nellis. It looked like earlier they weren't up, but I think they are up there now. So just do want to draw attention to that. There are a number of organizations, including Consumer Federation of America, Consumer Reports, the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, a joint business letter signed by a number of business and health organizations, and National Consumer Law Center, and a number of advocacy groups that are in support of the bill. So just want to bring attention to that and say thank you very much for hearing this today, and we urge the committee to move it forward. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Harris and the committee. My name is Marie Steele, Mariesteele. I'm here this morning on behalf of NV Energy in support of AB 383. Recognizing you have many things to get done today, I'll keep this very short and just wanted to say thank you to Assemblyman Watts for his work on this bill. We share his enthusiasm in reducing our carbon footprint and keeping our customers' energy bills low. I'm also very excited to hear about the flexible load technology here there as well, because that is equally important for our carbon goals. So we look forward to continuing our work on energy, climate, and equity policy in the built environment in the interim with the Assemblyman and with your committee. Thanks so much.
Okay, seeing no one else in the room who'd like to testify in support, BPS, could you poll the phone lines to see if there's anyone who'd like to testify in support of AB 383?
Thank you, Chair. Callers, if you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 383, please press star 9 now to enter the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 155 please state and spell your name for the record? You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI-CABRERA, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League here in support of AB 383. Increasing energy efficiency is good for our health, good for our environment, and will save Nevadans money. Energy efficiency is also a key climate priority in the 2021 Nevada Climate Strategy. Establishing these appliance standards are estimated to eliminate more than 1 million tons of CO2 from our atmosphere and save Nevadans $28 million per year by 2035. This bill gives Nevadans the opportunity to take another big step in combating the climate crisis and save Nevadans money. We urge your support and thank you for your time.
Will the next caller with the last 3 digits of 094 please state and spell your name for the record? You may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. David Bobzien, for the record, Director of the Governor's Office of Energy. We are signed in this morning in support of the legislation. We were neutral on the Assembly side out of concern for the original version of the bill. Had some practical concerns about implementation for our office, but we're very appreciative of the bill's sponsor for introducing the legislation and working with our office, as well as the work put in by other stakeholders to get this into a place where it is much more implementable now, and so we're looking forward to doing the work. The references to other standards assists our office in providing some technical signals to us that saves us from doing a lot of the work from scratch. So we're excited to engage with those cutting-edge standards for the products that are not covered by the Federal Energy Policy and Conservation Act, as was discussed. Certainly, what we heard from consumers as far as impacts, say, for instance, you had hot pocket warmers, and that there was only 2 manufacturers of those. With the language that we have now, we would have flexibility to acknowledge those potential consumer impacts before going forward with the standards. Something that I'm personally acutely aware of right now, as I just purchased yesterday a refrigerator that I will have to wait 8 weeks to take delivery of, just given where things are with the supply chain issues. I would note that for the model and the brand that I was looking at, the model that I ultimately selected was $200 cheaper than the comparable model, and the $200 cheaper model was the Energy Star certified model as opposed to the other one. A little quirk that I was able to come across as I was doing my research. And just in closing, I would reiterate what has already been mentioned, that this is a direct connection to the climate strategy, and we appreciate this legislation's support of our climate goals. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would
Mr.
stand for any
Bobzien,
questions.
before you jump off, please, we do have one question from Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bobzien. Just a quick question. Assemblyman Watts said your office will be enforcing this. Can you tell me how that's going to be done?
Yes, thank you, Senator Pickard. David Bobzien, for the record. And that was part of our conversation with the bill's evolution, making sure that this was providing us with flexibility that we may investigate if things are brought to our attention. This is a little more rigorous in structure than the enforcement responsibilities we have under the light bulb legislation that was passed last session. What we envision is if someone were to bring an issue to our attention that there was being sold a product that was not part of our our database query of acceptable products once the regulations are put in place, we would connect with the Attorney General's office to pursue the matter. Certainly, we're going to err on the side of education prior to bringing any sort of enforcement hammer down. But I think what is structured in the legislation makes it pretty clear how we would go about doing that. And I would note, and this connects to concerns raised by Senator Spearman prior, we did do outreach related to the light bulb standards. Those have gone quite well, and we've seen a distinct shift in the marketplace. We acknowledge that this is more expansive in scope, but we are prepared to undertake an outreach effort to prepare folks, because we do believe it's much better to educate people on the front end rather than having to sit back and wait for enforcement opportunities.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Bobbsey. And BPS will go ahead and take the next caller.
Thank you, Chair. Callers, once again, we are on support of AB 383. If you would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 383, please press star 9 now to enter the queue. Chair Harris, at this time, there are no additional callers wishing to provide testimony in support.
Okay, we'll come back to the room then. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to testify in opposition to AB 383? Not seeing any. BPS, could you see if there's anyone on the phone who'd like to testify in opposition to AB 383?
Thank you, Chair. Callers, if you'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 383, please press star 9 now to enter the queue. Once again, to provide testimony in opposition to AB 383, please press star 9 now. Chair Harris, at this time, no callers have indicated that they would like to provide testimony in opposition.
All right, thank you so much. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to testify in the neutral position? Okay, we have one.
Good morning, Chair Harris, Vice Chair Brooks, members of the committee. My name is Matt Morris, for the record, on behalf of Nevada Resort Association. Nevada Resort Association is neutral on Assembly Bill 383. NRA's members strongly support energy efficiency, conservation, and sustainability goals. As amended, AB 383 includes provisions that align with NRA's commitment to energy efficiency and sustainability. NRA acknowledges the work of the bill's sponsor, Assemblyman Watts, as well as the Governor's Office of Energy, to engage with stakeholders and include consumer protection measures to address any unintended consequences in the event that compliant products are not reasonably available. These additions cohere with appliance efficiency statutes that have been adopted in other jurisdictions, and we appreciate the sponsor's support for these provisions. Thank you.
Thank you. BPS, anyone on the phone line who'd like to testify in the neutral position?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 383, please press star 9 now to enter the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits of 184 please press star 6 to unmute yourself? Thank you, caller. Please state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Matt Walker, M-A-T-T-W-A-L-K-E-R, calling in on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. The Southern Nevada Home Builders Association has committed to the governor and other key regulators as part of the comment plan that the home builders will be at the table as a meaningful part of helping the state reach its climate goals. As this proposal has developed, obviously with a small state, we're always concerned about individual product mandates and the availability of product. That being said, the sponsor has been more than willing to engage. I think we've easily had a dozen stakeholder meetings with local building officials, Barbecue Association, other national associations, and the resulting bill is a much stronger and more implementable measure in our opinion. I'd like to just point out quickly a couple of key elements that we have been assured can be worked out in regulation, and that is the fact that the pilot light automatically extinguishing doesn't necessarily need to be simultaneous or with the same button as the control that shuts off the main burner, and that the 7-day pilot light shut off is from the last instance of the main burner use, not necessarily just like a calendar day shut off. So again, those are definitely things that we've been assured can be worked out in regulation, and just an example of some of the more detailed implementation things that we'll be at the table for. Want to again express our great thanks to Brian Fady, the team at ASAP, and the sponsor for their very diligent hard work in ensuring that this regulatory process would happen in a transparent and open manner. Thank you so much.
If there are any additional callers who would like to provide neutral testimony, please press *9 now. Chair Harris, at this time, there are no additional callers wishing to provide neutral testimony.
Okay. I'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 383. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts, for your time. Since we are on day 119, I'll also accept a motion at this time to do pass. Got a motion from Senator Brooks, a second from Senator Spearman. Any discussion on the motion? Senator Pickard.
Just a comment. I want to do a little more research. I'll vote yes to get it out of committee, but I'll reserve my right. I want to make sure that, we're doing the right thing. Thank you.
All right, we've got a motion on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion passes unanimously with the members present, and I will assign the floor statement to Senator Spearman. All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and close out that very quick work session and go on to public comment. BPS, is there anyone who'd like to give public comment?
Callers, if you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to enter the queue. Once again, to provide public comment, please press *9 now. Chair Harris, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you so much. Before we adjourn, this is likely our last meeting of the session. And I wanted to thank, I said likely, no guarantees. And I wanted to thank all of the fantastic people who have made this committee work. I'll start off with the committee members. You all have been fantastic and engaged, and I truly appreciate you. Ms. Scully, the legend, live and in the flesh, has been amazing as our policy analyst. Eileen O'Grady as our legal counsel, while also juggling being finance as legal counsel, which is a huge job in its own. Eileen, thank you so much. Ms. Kasura, who is the committee manager, but also my legislative assistant. Paula Peters, Debbie Shope, great committee secretaries in the building, and of course, our broadcast services, who is an indomitable force in a kind of dual electronic in-person world. You guys have managed that fantastically, and we could not have done any of this without you. So thank you all so much, and I wish you all the very best. We are adjourned.